federal agencies. If there's one thing we know in this life, it's that they suck. And here to talk about getting rid of some of those places that suck is Lathan Watts, the Vice President of Public Affairs over at the Alliance Defending Freedom. It's good to be with you, dude.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
So you've got in your crosshairs, or we should really say in the country's crosshairs, 3 federal agencies that you guys are saying Trump needs to take a in the middle of a home run series, just fastball down the middle swing at. What are they, and why, if one has to ask such a follow-up?
Well, certainly. One of the most, I think, effective campaign commercials during this most recent cycle was the Trump ad that showed Kamala Harris supporting transgender surgeries for inmates and also for illegal immigrants and just anybody who wanted them. And it ended with the tagline, Kamala Harris is for they, them, and Donald Trump is for you. And I think that issue was really a sleeper issue in the election cycle. I think some of the exit polling showed that with a lot of different voting blocks. And with the promise of reducing government and getting DEI policies and some other kind of woke ideology out of the federal government, we found there's plenty of examples, but the article that I wrote focused on 3. The worst of which, but not surprisingly, was at the National Institute of Health, that was funding a study through the University of Nebraska that paid teens to be matched with adult mentors without consent of their parents. These are teens who are either confused about their biological sex or their identity.
From Indiana, I'm getting a Kinsey Institute vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And even with the best of intentions, the fact that you're keeping this from parents, I mean, the home page says you do not have to have consent of your legal guardian or parent to be a part of this program.
Functioning adults would call that suspicious at the least, but anyway.
So that's probably the most egregious, but just to show how it's almost in any agency you can think of, the Department of Agriculture, which administers like the 4-H program, they also have a policy that if they have counselors at 4-H camps who identify as another gender, they will be allowed to bunk with the gender they identify. And there's a parent who discovered this policy when he was considering whether or not to let his daughter attend an overnight 4-H camp, and brought it to their attention and was told that is the policy. And when asked if parents had any say in the matter or concerns about it, the reply was, well, I'll pass that up the chain. Well, come January, Donald Trump will be the top of that chain. And if they're serious about returning policy to sanity and common sense, these are easily programs that should be on the chopping block.
Gotcha. So this is much less about, in this case, it's not just, going out there and saying, all right, Department of Agriculture, cut, the National Institute of Health, cut. This in this case, it's certain disturbing programs inside these agencies that just on day one, executive order, because the president is in charge of our glorious bureaucracy, that should be getting the kibosh immediatamente.
Right. And just as you said, I mean, he's the head of the executive branch. These are executive branch agencies. So one would think that through his cabinet secretary and other, administrative oversight, these programs could be ended. Obviously, you would expect some political pushback, but he has the authority to do it. He is the head of the executive branch.
Is there going to be a way that we find some weird federal circuit court in one of the more blue districts, as it were, that is going to swing through and file some kind of, I don't know if they can file some kind of injunction? I hear we're in the stage right now where we're kind of daydreaming, right? Like, oh, here are all the things that he can do. And then he gets into office and he does like one thing on the list of 20, and immediately there's like someone who bursts out like a jack in the box and is like, hold it right there. Section 4038 says no.
Right. Well, I think any president coming into a second term, even though this one was interrupted by someone else's term, is going to learn from experience from the first term. And so I would suspect that whoever is being staffed at the top levels of the new administration's Department of Justice to be prepared for legal challenges to anything that they try to do. So, in this case, if it was ending a program in a federal agency, it would not surprise me, as you suggested, if someone found a plaintiff and filed a federal lawsuit and tried to get an injunction to stop it. But again, he's the head of the executive branch. These are executive branch agencies, and he's going to be on strong legal grounds to defend those actions. So we'll have to wait and see.
I mean, are there any programs in these federal agencies that are not able to be touched by the president? Because my question is that although the president is supposed to be in charge of these executive branch agencies, Congress has established, I know all of these agencies by law, but has Congress established certain programs within these agencies by law? And if they have, does that handcuff him from actually acting towards this? Or if there's funding that goes towards this program?
That's a great question, because there are so many departments and agencies and programs, and in each of them probably has certain protocols. But if Trump has, at least for the first 2 years, a Republican majority in the House and Senate, you also have the budget process. So if you produce a budget that doesn't fund any of these programs, that's another way to go at them. So if he's got cooperation from the majorities from a budget perspective, if you've got Elon and Vivek looking for ways to save money, well, here's some programs you could easily do without, and maybe you go through the budget process as well.
Let's dig into the hypothetical territory, because this is where the fun happens for those that are in the legal side of things and also in the media side of things. Let's talk about our candy land here for a particular second. Imagine, for instance, that Trump is going to get in there and he's going to axe the DEI programs in all of these federal agencies, right? We've heard the sheep bleating about it for months. I'm pretty sure I saw Rachel Maddow's hair change color at least 4 times when grunting about it on MSNBC. But when Trump goes to say, all right, that's it, it's over, you're fired, then are we going to see some line in like the 2022 omnibus bill du jour that says this will be funded? And then people try to pull some kind of well, Congress has allotted this funding, and if you don't follow what the funding that the purse has said for these things, I mean, you can only get so far. Well, I should clarify. For Republicans, you can only get so far with prosecutorial discretion. The executive does what he believes is the interpretation of that law. But Republicans don't get to do that, right? Democrats, they can do whatever they want. Republicans, they get slapped on the wrist immediately. Is there any kind of a springboard there for someone to file some kind of magical lawsuit and says, no, this has to be funded for eternity?
Well, I'm not sure about the lawsuit angle, but it does highlight what your question highlights is something that's very important, which is the reason why it's so important to pass a budget and not fund the entire federal government with one omnibus spending bill, because that's how they paint themselves into this corner where if you want this, you have to agree to everything.
Yeah, if you want border funding, then you've got to trans the kids in Nebraska. I mean, that's all right. My hands are tied.
Exactly. And so, which just highlights, like I said, the importance of passing an actual budget, because then you pass a series of appropriations bills to fund the different sections of the budget. And then you can have an up and down vote on this appropriation for this agency, for this program, versus, well, it's all one big Christmas tree. And so everybody just tacks on their favorite ornaments. And, if you don't like, what I put on top of the tree, then you got to burn the whole thing down, like, Uncle Lewis and Christmas Vacation or something like that's why we need a functioning budget process.
Well said. Lathan Watts, Vice President of Public Affairs over at the Alliance Defending Freedom. You can find them over at adflegal.org. Make sure you follow them over there, because they've got a lot of great updates coming out about this stuff. Just daydreaming is fantastic. But unless you know how it works, you're not going to know what to root for when it's griped about on national media. So, Lathan, thanks for stopping by.
Glad to be back. Glad to come back anytime. Thanks for having me.